It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Jim Smithson, who's our speaker tonight. I know some of you were expecting Beth to be our speaker tonight, but sadly she's taken ill in the last day or so. But she's very kindly managed to get one of the other trustees of the Great War Group to speak to us tonight. So I think it's quite apt with it being Remembrance Day yesterday and Remembrance Sunday last weekend with the Great War, etc. So, Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Darren. And good evening to everybody. And first of all, I'll pass on Beth's personal apologies for not being able to get here. She's really not a very poorly, she's really a very poorly young lady at the moment. Not sure whether it's COVID or not, but she has lots of the symptoms and is really feeling very sorry for herself at the moment. So very much apologies from her. But in some respects, I think it's not a bad thing that somebody other than one of the two co-founders is talking about the group, because it really centers a lot around those two young ladies, and that's really what I want to talk about. My talk will have a general theme of what is possible when you have enthusiasm and determination to get something underway against what can sometimes be a difficult background and a difficult atmosphere. And just to give a little bit of a background to military history, which is a necessity if you have to understand where the Great War Group is coming from. It's something which has been an underlying theme, obviously, for a long time in terms of authorship and on the academic scene, and also having a lot of non-academic interest as well. So there's been the two camps of academia with its actual courses on military history and war and conflict, and also the more personal ideas that many people have had, certainly in Britain, but also in other countries as well, of following in the footsteps and following their forebears. I think the increase in the whole idea of searching your family over the last 20 years and genealogy generally, and the popularity of genealogy has led a lot of people to find out about their past and about their relatives. And often that, nearly always, for lots of people, and anyone who watches Who Do You Think You Are on British television will know that nearly always there is a family relative somewhere who has been involved in the First World War. And so the First World War has become very much a central theme in a lot of families. Now, what that has done is it's meant that military history has taken a very strange sort of direction academically. The academics tend to feel a little bit threatened by a lot of the non-academics. And so what you have is a dichotomy of academia in the universities, studying war and society on a very academic, dry level. And then a lot of people for whose interest is not at that level, but they're incredibly interested in military and the First and the Second World War. Just concentrate on the First World War, that over the last, maybe 15, 20 years, has really become a white, male-dominated field. I think a lot of that is to do with ex-forces. A lot of military ex-forces get involved in that. I'm not that. My background is education. And that is the background and atmosphere within which the two co-founders, Alexandra Churchill and Bethany Moore, actually started this whole project. That's the background that they were within. Not an easy background for two young female historians. My background, as I said, is education. I am a military historian now. I'm also a battlefield guide. Alex is a long-term military historian. She has been in the field quite a long time. You may have seen her on television. She's had a number of appearances on a number of programs. If you watch Yesterday Channel and one or two other channels that are still running some of those programs, you'll see her pop up every now and then. Beth is younger, and she's really more recently joined the sort of fray as a battlefield guide. So she has worked for a company and gone out to France and Belgium and taken groups out there. But they know each other from the point of view of being two young females. They really are bonding. All of the females who are involved in military history tend to know each other quite well because they support each other in what is a difficult field, as I said, for anybody of the female sex. And as Alex would say, one gin-soaked night over Zoom she and Bethany decided that they really ought to do something about the present state of affairs of clubs and atmosphere and approachability of military history to everybody in the educational field. And so they thought, we'll start our own group. And as they said, after that evening, it was then a sort of, what do we do about it? Well, they decided to start something by crowdfunding. And this is only this year and only in the beginning of June. So we're in June this year that this all started. And they decided to crowdfund for two reasons. Firstly, to gauge the amount of interest there might be in a particular type of group. And B, to enable that group to have a magazine and a web presence without it being at risk to anybody. And they had a target of £5,000 and they reached that quite quickly because of the interest that was given towards this new idea. And I say new idea, and it attracted me as one of those old white male military historians, in the fact that it had the idea of education being pushed out to a lot more people than the present situation. It had the idea that it was going to be much more inclusive. And the idea was that it would be something where lots of people would get involved and it would be a community. So more than a society where there are a small number of people maybe leading it and everyone else following it and reading whatever magazines or whatever publications are produced, that everybody would become involved. And that I thought was good. And so I got involved quite early on. I supported both Alex and Beth early on. And because I've worked with another group, the Western Front Association, Alex decided to use me as a test for what the magazine should look like. So we had lots of communication about the magazine, about what should be in it, about what her ideas were, which I supported nearly all the ideas she was having. And that got me then involved because then Alex asked me to be a trustee, which I was very pleased to be. I accepted that without any hesitation at all. Having worked in other groups, I just felt that the aims and objectives, which I'll come on to in a moment, of what Beth and Alex were trying to put together, I thought were absolutely superb. And so I was willing to be involved straight away. And so our first task really was to find some more trustees, because the whole idea was this will be set up as a charity. And that as a charitable trust, we had to have trustees. And so you can't, at first, Alex really only wanted to run it with just 3 or 4 people. And I said, well, the Charity Commission will not accept that. And I think from that moment on, Alex saw me as the calmer person, the one who would bring a little bit of calm into the sort of whirlwind that she was creating, that Beth and her were creating in trying to get this thing off the ground. But we did decide to use a number of other trustees. Alex had already found another trustee in America, in fact, Giles McNamee in America. He was willing to underwrite some of the project and some of the ideas early on, and give some sort of support from a financial point of view to the whole procedures. We then found 2 other trustees and felt that that was the sort of number of trustees we could have. And it's a mix of trustees, the 2 ladies, obviously, myself, somebody else who's a postgraduate PhD student. He's doing his PhD on military history at the moment. Giles in America, who's more of my status, elderly person, and then someone in the middle who's not an academic and not a battlefield guide, but just somebody who is useful to give a shining light to what we're doing. And again, a useful sounding board for some of our ideas. So that was when we put the trustees together, we were able to apply to be a trust with the Charity Commission. And we succeeded to do that. We've also succeeded to get a website running, and all the details of the trustees and a bit more background on Alex and Beth and myself and others you can find on that website. I'll give details of that later. Beth was going to show a number of elements out of the website tonight. I decided not to use the presentation in that sort of way. You can go and look up those things yourself if you're interested, and I'll answer questions on the club at the end, on the group at the end. I wanted really to talk about what they had done, because those 2 ladies were driving this thing forward to the point where we have just delivered to everybody who are members and we now have over 400 members. So we've reached a membership of 400 within. We launched in mid-September with the website. So within a month and a half, we've gone to 400 members. Our target was actually one a day for the year. So the target was 365 members for the year. We've already broken that target within 1.5 months. And landing on every member's doorstep this week, and hopefully some more, as Darry's holding up, and I'll hold it up as well in case people have got me on speaker view and they're looking at it, is this, which is our first publication. Salient Points is the main magazine for the group, and it's not a low quality, quickly produced type magazine. It's high quality, full color. You can see the sort of layout that it has. It's 130 odd pages, I think. No, so 100, just over 100 pages, full color. And what's really fantastic about it, I'm speaking now as someone who's been in military history for around 40 years now. It's probably the most widely diversive type of magazine ever produced in terms of its content and the people who produced it, and the people who have contributed to it. Basically, it's following the objectives of the group. And the objectives of the group are quite simply education for everybody and creating a community where people feel they can be involved in military history and take the story forward of the Great War. And to do that, we wanted as many different people from different walks of life. So some of the entries in there are from PhD students. One is from an undergraduate student. Many are from people who've not had a degree level education, but have had military history as their interest throughout their years. There are people from, I think it's something like around 7 different countries as contributors. There's a Dane, an Italian, a French, a Belgian, an Australian, all contributing to that magazine and contributing to the group generally as well. That was the main objective in terms of production of material, was the magazine. But not only one magazine, because as I said, education is the big idea behind the group. And therefore we wanted children to be involved as well. And so we decided to have a children's membership level and a family membership level. Details again, which can be found on the website. And we have a magazine, which unfortunately isn't out yet, so I can't show you a copy of that. We have a magazine for the younger generation as well, aimed at 8 to 14-year-olds. And that one's called Over the Top. And its main feature will be a graphic story. In other words, a story of somebody or something, but told in a graphical form, in a way that is a little bit more accessible maybe to the 8 to 14-year-olds as opposed to close script. And the first topic for that, for example, is Walter Tull, the coloured footballer and professional footballer turned and eventually officer within the British Army in the Great War. And he's a fairly well-known tale, and we've decided to put that into the first of the Over the Top for children. It's also got lots of other things in there. And in fact, just to show you, we've also got a sort of mascot for the children as well. And that is, this is, if I introduce you to Montague, that's Montague the monoculed mule, that was thought up on a slightly drunken Zoom call between the trustees, which shows the sort of pace we're going at and how it's done. It's not all done in a drunken phase, honestly, but we're trying to actually attract that younger generation into remembrance and into the idea of not necessarily studying the Great War, but having an understanding about it, and also hopefully reducing some of the myths that perpetrate about the Great War, because unfortunately the Great War is surrounded by myth, and there's nothing like this week to hear all of those myths of lions led by donkeys and those sorts of things that are still being banded today. And so we're hoping that the younger generation will pick up some of the ideas that we're putting in there, but also giving them an education about the world, because that magazine also has a feature about, one of it is Where on Earth Is. One of the articles is Where on Earth Is, and it's about somewhere in the world where the Great War was there, took place. It's not all about Europe. For example, the first one in the magazine is about Shatt al Arab, which is the mouth of the river of the the mouth of the river running into the Tiber and Euphrates that is within what was Mesopotamia in the Great War. And so it's another part of geography for them, as well as the history that happened there as well. So it's been quite a whirlwind. And the two ladies have dealt with a lot of problems at the beginning, a lot of doubt from a lot of people at the beginning. And they've just driven through that to the point where we now have a website. It's fully functioning. We have, as I said, 400 members. It's growing all the time. We hope to move on to have virtual tours on the website. Alex has already visited Gallipoli with a trusty drone and camera and taken some superb footage of the area there. I personally haven't been to Gallipoli, and I loved watching the footage that we saw the other day. So we'll put virtual tours together to allow people to actually go to some of the battlefields that they might never be able to get to. And so these are the sort of offers that we're going to be putting on the website. We also have a forum on the website for people to get involved, people to ask for research, and people to get involved in trying to find out things about their own family. And as a community, we will help people to do that. So that's how we're that's the functioning of the group and how the group is wanting to go forward. And we're looking at 4 magazines each year of each type. One of the salient points for adults and one over the top for younger people. 4 of those in each of the years. Hopefully, each one will be welcomed in terms of its number of contributors being different. The topics are very different. There's always going to be a theme behind one of the magazines. It's remembrance this time, as you can see on that part of the thing there. It's remembrance this time, but that's only about a third of the magazine. The rest of the magazine is taken up by other articles written by people and a very diverse amount of material as well. So the material in the first one, for example, runs from something about the withdrawal from Gallipoli by Peter Hart, who's just got a book out on the same thing. It's got something about more social aspects. It's got something about the Danes within the German army. I didn't even realize Danes fought within the German army. And that's someone who's been in military history for quite a while, been in the Great War area for quite a while. It's also got a regular feature by Simon Verdiger, who's a Belgian archaeologist and a very well-known one. He's basically the go-to man in Belgium whenever there is some work to be done there, or where remains are found, or where some Great War trenches are found whilst they're digging something else. He's the one who then goes and does the rescue archaeology to find out what's there. He was involved in a very big project on an area near Ypres in Belgium a couple of years ago, and he's going to be writing a regular feature for us. Also involved in the magazine with a regular feature of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. I hear you heard about the Poppy last week. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which looks after thousands and thousands of sites throughout the world. There's not many parts of the world that does not have a Commonwealth War Graves Commission presence, and that includes America. And they have a regular feature as well. So we have a couple of articles by members of that organization in this month, and in the next one I'm sure there'll be something else. So that's the diversity of the sort of material that we're hoping to produce, and we're hoping that members begin to say, I could write something about this as well. I could write something, I know something about this area because of my family interests or my own personal interests. And so that's something that we're hoping to encourage people who may not have ever thought of writing for either a magazine or writing a book or anything of that nature. Encourage them to be involved, encourage them to come and get involved and have a go, and we'll support them and help them. So for example, we have an article coming up in the next issue, which is being written by a 17-year-old who is keen to get some of her ideas that she's got down on paper and down out there, but is obviously very nervous about doing that at that age. The military history community can be quite harsh with people who put out some material, and so we will help her and help and support her to actually produce something which she can be proud of and will be published. And that's quite something for anybody of a young age to be involved in. So that's the sort of thing that we're trying to do as a group. I think we will expand We have ideas. We have an idea that we will start producing a community-based book. We already have an idea for the first of the books that we'll do, which will be a divisional history. Some news will come out soon about that. Again, asking the community of our members that if they wish to be involved, to come and get involved and actually be involved in the production of something which is missing. The divisional histories from the First World War, nearly all divisions have a history. It's usually written in the 20s and 30s. A number of divisions, for one reason or another, do not. 14th Division doesn't, and we're hoping to fill that gap. But we're going to do it as a community project with lots of people involved. We're not sure how that's going to work yet. That's another Zoom meeting this coming weekend, which again, I'm sure will be full of chat and a few drinks and so on. But we'll come to some arrangements about how it will work. So we have the small number of trustees that we have on purpose. We do not want to be a large organization, top heavy, that really the membership do not feel that they're close to. We want really the membership to feel that they're part of a community and that we're just up there as trustees because a charity has to have trustees, and that we're as accessible as anybody else in the group and anybody else in the community, which is not the case in some other groups and some other communities that I know in the military history field. So I've rattled on quite intensely for about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. As I said at the beginning, a lot of the more information about the trustees, more information about membership, because we have personal membership, we have family membership, and we have a student membership. The details of that, including costs and so on, are all on the website. The website you can find very easily if you just Google Great War Group. We come at the top of the Google list, and you'll find our website, you'll find our Twitter account, you'll find our Facebook account if you want to follow what we're doing and have a look at what we're doing. If you do get onto the website, then you'll find information for people who do want to join. And I think Darren's just put up the actual link there on screen for people. Unfortunately, a number of you here are not UK. If you wanted to be involved, it would cost more. It's £40 membership per year for 4 magazines, and obviously membership of the website. It's more expensive for people abroad simply because it costs a lot of money to get the magazine abroad. There is no markup for Europe or rest of the world except the additional postage. We really do stress that because it looks as if we're being punitive against people who live in Australia, New Zealand, or in America, who are wanting to get involved. It really is just a matter of posting a magazine out to you 4 times a year, which brings on the extra cost. It's amazing how we were amazed how expensive it is when we looked at it. They're the differences. So more details of that are on there. With membership, you get access to areas of the website that are behind the paywall, which are a forum for people to get involved in, and also a library, which has, I think, around 300 volumes in at the moment, which you're allowed to download as PDFs to keep. So it's not a library where you have to return anything. 10 a week, 10 a month we're allowing. So it'll take a while to actually download them all. But there are a lot of books on there. Most of them are available somewhere on the internet, but we've been able to collect them all together. We acquired them all from a different source and have them there for our members to gain access to. A lot of really good books on there as well. So that's for they're the membership thing. So more information on the website if you are interested. Obviously, not everybody's interested in the Great War, but if you are, then the website is something to follow. And really, then I'm open to people who may have questions about the group, what our objectives are, what we're trying to do, or any of the questions that you may have. So I'll hand over to questions.
Thanks very much for that, Jim. Before I actually open up for questions, one question I've just got, obviously, as you pointed out, I'm a member of a group already myself. With the actual library, I've got particular interest with the Somme. My great-grandfather died on the first day of the Somme. I've noticed in the library there's a few PDFs downloaded there. With the library, how often would it be looked to develop it and expand on what's already in there, or is what's in there now really what's going to stay there?
Oh no, we're hoping to expand, and I know that Peter Bull, who is one of the trustees who's looking after the library, because he basically got hold of a lot of the material to start off with, He's been moving house recently, so the library's stuck at 270 or 280 volumes. I think he's got a few hundred volumes still to go on. So it is still going to expand. I mean, there's obviously we have copyright issues, and therefore there are only so many books that can be out there available. But we're hoping to get more on, and we're hoping to also expand with access to many of the articles and things which I know are online and available, but sometimes very hard to get hold of and find. Maybe also, like, the library will expand into areas that we are copyright free from, some of the areas such as National Archives and so on, but those will be a negotiated area, I think, that we'll get into. But for now, it's a matter of books. But we do hope to expand it to, we would like to do a little bit as Chris Baker has done with his website, where he has a lot of great war material information on there. Have something that the members can get all the information in one place, instead of having to search for lots of different things in lots of different areas, and usually come across something only by accident. I know I do all the time. I come across articles by accident because I just happen to go on one page and I find something. I think, why isn't this in the wider circles? Why aren't people reading this? So we're hoping to expand it. Yes, very much so.
Great stuff. Are there any other questions at all?
This is stunned, Peter.
Peter, you're muted.
Thank you, Jim. And I like your website. I particularly like the bit about all fronts and all nations. And I want to ask a question about peace rather than war, because one of the objects of the fourth object of Rotary is the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace. And one of the areas of focus, if you apply for Rotary money, is peace building, and we fund peace scholarships at Bradford University. To be against the war in the First World War must have been very difficult. My father-in-law was Quaker. My sister went to a Quaker school, and they couldn't have the heroism, and they couldn't be celebrated in the same way as the people who went to the front, and in Darren's case, his great-grandfather who died there. But one of the things we've got to do about war now, if at all possible, is to allow the voice of the people who want peace, who are against war, to be heard. Is there any way in which your Great War Group is going to look at the people who were against the war and who maybe served as stretcher bearers and medics and everything, but actually weren't prepared to fight?
I'm sure we will be. Certainly, we're wanting almost every issue of the magazine to have social aspects in it, such as the war at home, in terms of how it affected people at home, how it affected the families at home, and certainly we're hoping to get people involved. We know one or two people who've been involved in that area already, and we're hoping to get them on board to write some material on that. But certainly one of our objectives, really, again, is that it's not just a matter of it's all fighting. It's all about the war. It's all about the campaigns and all about the fighting. It's really an all-encompassing focus on the Great War as a social, as well as a military scene.
Well, that's in there on your website. There's a lot on there's that bit that's called Herstory, all about women in war, which well, I'm not the best person to comment, but both wars must have made a huge difference to the position of women in society. Oh, I'll stop.
I'm hoping we do have some of the, we do have on board one or two people who are already working in that field in academia, because this is the mix we have. I mean, one of our book reviewers is a PhD student, sorry, a postgrad. She has a doctorate. She is an early career researcher in Oxford. And she's one of our book reviewers, and she has worked a lot on the social sides of the war. And we're hoping that there's many articles in there. We have to find a balance. We have a membership which probably is in the majority those who are interested in what could be termed the military, the very purely military side of it. But that's where we think the education is required. We would like those people, and me as well, I'd like to read more about those things. And it's also a matter of how the impact on the Commonwealth and the rest of the world as well. And that's why we're trying to involve as many other people, writers from elsewhere as possible, that they can write about the experiences of, for example, in the first magazine about the Danes, who found that they were fighting for the Germans because part of the Danish area was part of Prussia, so they had to fight for Germany. So it was a matter of how that affected the Danes and how it affected the Danes afterwards, when they had to decide whether they were going to be part of Germany or part of Denmark. The sort of area Schleswig-Holstein, the southern part of Denmark, which could have been Germany, could have been in Denmark. So we're looking at all those sort of things, and we're hoping that all our output, whatever it may be, is balanced as much as possible. That's something we're trying to do. I think the next magazine will possibly seem a little bit more on the military side, because the next magazine is about the Spring Offensive in 1918, the German Spring Offensive, as a third of the magazine. But even then, other elements of the magazine will be emphasizing different things. And I think, just to show you something else, I think the front cover of the, which can be bought in the shop, a bit of a sales thing, the front cover of the calendar is women in World War I, in the First World War. So we're very aware of that as an element to what we're looking at, and certainly for a sort of underpinning our whole sort of ethos is this diversity, and peace has to be part of that. It can't just be all about war. It's about the effects of war. And you were talking about the fact that there is a particular soldier from the First World War who was a Quaker, who was very highly decorated by the end of the war because he was a stretcher bearer. And I'm sure there'll be an article on him at some point, because he is a very, I'll not take all the interest away from that. But Quakers did get involved, but also we'll have, I'm sure at some point, we'll have articles on conscientious objectors and the problems that they had, and the problems that the fact that they had to bring in the silver badge as something to be worn by those who were deemed unfit to serve anymore because of wounds. That had to be introduced because men were walking the streets around and being harangued about not being in the army when they couldn't be in the army anymore because they'd been wounded. And they had to have a silver star to be able to wear, so that to say, look, I actually have fought and I'm wounded, and therefore I can't fight anymore. Stop attacking me, as people were. So yes, those themes are all going to be interrelated, hopefully. And remembrance as well. That's something that we're really very keen on, which is why every issue of the magazine will have an article on a particular cemetery, and it may not, or usually a Commonwealth War Grave cemetery, but I'm sure it may be a French one sometimes, or a German one, or an Italian one, or a Portuguese one, somewhere from the Great War.
Thanks for that, Jim. I know Kelly's got a question, but before I ask Kelly her question, I'd just like to point out in the chat, Shannon has put a very good web link, just reminding us all about World War I from the Pacific side of things. I can see from the chat that I can see Sarah's looked at it already very quite useful link there. So thanks very much for sharing that with us, Shannon. That's greatly appreciated. And Kelly, you've got a question there, I believe.
I'm curious as to, in terms of military history, there's so much out there. Why the focus on the Great War? You know, I mean, like, kind of, do you not feel tempted to expand onto other things, or is there a reason why you're just kind of focusing on that?
I think in terms of general press and in terms of what is out there for people to look at from the military history point of view, the Second World War dominates. And I think the Second World War is something which is well documented in terms of both academic material and also from magazines and other material that's around there. I think the Great War is not. And I think one of the things that all of us who are working within the Great War are very conscious of, and this goes all the way down from people who are professors at university, all the way down to people like myself, is that the First World War is still even though we'd just gone through the centenary, massively misunderstood within the British public, to some extent within the French public as well, but less so, and certainly is not regarded in the right sort of way whatsoever within the German public that I know. I was in Germany for quite a long time. And so I think we still see that we felt as a group of historians who are involved in lots of other military history as well. Not all of us. Alex certainly is involved in other areas. I'm involved in Second World War history as well. Beth is more Great War. But we felt that the Great War was something that still needed education. And 100 years plus now from the event, if that education wasn't continued, those myths that are now very prevalent within certainly British society will just predominate, and they'll go into the next century without any question whatsoever. So we're trying to question some of those. There are not myths about the Second World War, because the Second World War was a very straightforward idea of the fight against evil. So there's no argument about how it was. There are arguments about how it was done and whether it was, where the mistakes were made and so on, from a military history point of view. But the morals and the ideas behind it are very simple. The Germans were the bad guys and everybody else were the good guys, and we had to beat them. The Great War is a very different animal, and therefore needs very much more careful presentation than it has been in the last, and certainly better presentation than it was over the centenary, which, to be honest, was a failure.
Thanks.
Okay.
You'll hear a little bit of passion about it from me.
No problem. Any other questions at all?
Yeah, Jim, are you getting a much membership interest from the younger age limits, the younger age range?
I've not got a demographic. I have to be honest on that one. I've got a feeling the early part of this is probably a very similar one to other groups from the Great War, in terms of it's probably a slightly older population at the moment. But I'm hoping that certainly from those areas where I know the people involved, in other words, they're already working in the Great War somewhere, they have joined, and these are young, early careers researchers, postgraduates, people doing their PhDs and so on. What I'm hoping we get out to slowly but surely, and I think this is our next sort of area to sort of point at, are younger people who perhaps are not in some form of academia. And I think that is a target for us, but a difficult one. But we are working with 5 schools in terms of looking at how we could, as a group, help schools in their education, because that's a start. That's somewhere where we need to start. And also we're working with other partners who take school tours as well. So at the very young age, of school age and so on, I think the demographic that we probably have most difficulty with would be what I would term the 25s to 40s. That's an area of people that we need to somehow target. Not sure how we're going to do that, but that may be our next objective, to try and raise that demographic. But I'd have to ask, I must admit, it's a great question for me to ask Alex, because she's got the spreadsheet of people, whether she can actually gain an age, because we don't actually ask that of a membership. People obviously have to have a credit card to join. Obviously families and the youth one don't, they can be joined through an adult. But most of the adult ones, we won't know what the age is. But I got a feeling, having seen the sort of people who've been saying that they've got their magazine through and so on, that we've reached the demographic we thought we'd get to for a start, but then we need to work on trying to get a better one, a more spread out demographic.
Wynne, is that a question?
I saw a wave down off the corner of my screen there.
You're muted.
You're still muted, I think.
Sorry, every time I press my mouse, it double clicks. So sorry about that. Yes, Jim, thank you very much. You mentioned about ancestry, so you could look up who your forebears were that had fought in the war. Some of mine fought on the other side. Will you be including ancestry on that side as well? Records of
definitely. I mean, we have links with all other nations, really. Anybody from the German side is a more difficult one because the German records are not complete. For example, we have all the records of all of those that have no known grave. The Germans don't. They don't even have the record that they don't have a grave. In other words, you can't even find out much about them at all, unfortunately. lots and lots of records have just disappeared. But we can try, we can find, we can help people try, and we have resources for Italy, France, and so on in terms of trying to do that. Whereabouts were your ancestors?
In Germany. One side of my family. I believe my grandfather was old enough to fight in the Great War, but I don't know. He never talked about it. So, and he was in his 80s when in the 1960s. So he should have been the right age.
But we do have expertise. I mean, I was in Germany 30 odd years, so I tend to use a lot of German sources. And there are others who we know who we have as contacts and group members who are experts on the German army and the Austro-Hungarian army as well. So we can go all sorts of different directions.
Interesting. Yeah.
Pass people on to those who are better than us. Should it be more difficult to find out information?
And I suppose do you have to deal with the politics as well of the whole thing, the idiotic politicians that sent all these poor young men to war?
I think yes, it has to be. You can't avoid that. I think again the myths and the mythology around some of that has to be challenged in terms of politicians and what the politicians had to do. It's interesting that that's still a fight within the military community. In fact, it's even a fight within the trustees, because if you asked Alex about Lloyd George, he would basically spit blood. Whereas I look at him a little more generously, because I feel he had a country to run as well as a war to win, and that's not an easy balance. But those arguments go on, and it can't be hidden. You cannot stay away from that. And I'm sure we'll have some work that actually covers Lloyd George and Asquith and all the other people involved, and in Germany as well, in terms of the taking over of the German government, in a sense, by the military, because that's what it was in the end in Germany, with Hindenburg and Ludendorff basically running the country as well as the army. So it has to be involved. It's wrapped up. You cannot separate them. They're wrapped up together.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, that's great. Time is moving on, so we're not going to pass back to you. If I could ask you to give the vote of thanks, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Jim. What a fantastic organisation. You didn't mention when it was founded. How long have you been going?
June this year, basically.
Oh my goodness, 400 members in that time.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's an incredible success. And I've been looking at the website as well, just as Peter has been, and very impressive.
June is when it was still being mulled over. In a sense, the launch was in September.
Gosh. And I see you've got a healthy balance of women as well, which is fantastic. It's really good. My first sort of experience of the Great War was 42 years ago, when I started working as an archaeologist in the local museum, and one of the first publications I picked up was a book about the Great War. It was actually more of a magazine, but it was about the horrors of the First War. I couldn't believe that somebody had actually produced a book, and every page was a full black and white. You probably know it actually, a full black and white picture of horrors, absolute horrors, with heads blown off and everything. It was just like there must have been about 50 pages of just horror after horror after horror. And you thought, why would they produce something like that after the war? You know, when they had won. But actually the horror of it was so great. And that's what Remembrance was founded on, or Armistice Day, and then Remembrance was founded on, actually trying to remember all the soldiers in the war, all the people who died, the 20 million, and the whole thing.
And those who returned, not the same.
Sorry,
all of those who returned, not the same. And I don't just mean physically. They were obviously physically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were not the same men anymore.
No. Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, ruined, yes, indeed. Yeah. Ruined, yes, psychologically and everything. Yes, yeah. And some of the sites I look after actually have practice trenches on them. And a friend of mine has been digging at Plug Street, and researching, doing the archaeological excavations there. So. But it is interesting that, and it came up last week with the poppy thing, and I've been thinking about it ever since, about how lots of people are talking about the heroism and the glory of the soldiers, but actually it was all about such a dreadful 4 years. I mean, it was just horror from end to end, and it's a very interesting study, but on the emotional side, it's actually absolutely ghastly. and it's just amazing that you've set up this group, and it's brilliant. And I hope we might be in touch very soon about some of our practice trenches, because I work for English Heritage, and we have practice trenches at Old Oswestry and places like that. So yeah, it'd be nice to meet and talk about that in the future. But thank you so much for enlightening us about the group, and hopefully we'll some of us might even join, actually. But thank you so much for coming to speak to us.
All be very welcome. All be very welcome.
Thank you.